Verse 17, when I saw him, when John saw Jesus, first time he'd probably seen him, maybe 60 plus years. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. Let me put this in perspective for you. Out of the 12 disciples that walked with Jesus in his 3 years of public ministry, I would say John was probably the closest in friendship. There was a closeness and friendship that the two of them had. He was young. He was a teenager. Jesus was in his 30s. That John looked to him maybe almost like a dad figure, obviously as rabbi, as a Messiah. But even at the Last Supper, when they were reclining at the table, those tables were really low, and you kind of put your shoulder on one edge, and then you had your feet going out from the table. At the Last Supper, John, it says, the one whom Jesus loved, that's how he talked about himself in third person. He leaned back against the chest of Jesus. Just a show of love and of care, like, man, I'm leaning back into Jesus. Why do I share that small nugget of the Last Supper? Because if anybody knew and loved and appreciated Jesus and walked with him and could recognize him, it was John the Apostle. But now that Jesus has not only resurrected but been glorified and ascended to heaven, John's only response was he could only fall at the feet of Jesus like a dead man. It reminds me of Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah was also caught up in the Spirit in this spiritual vision that he was not ready for. I'll just put it that way. He says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. I believe he saw a pre-incarnate form of Jesus in Isaiah 6. He says, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. It was so beautiful and so majestic. You know what he says in verse 5 of Isaiah 6? He saw the creatures, the angels flying around, and he knew he was somewhere he didn't deserve to be. I'll just put it that way. You know what his response was in verse 5? Woe is me. Modern day terms, I'm as good as dead. I am in the presence of holiness, of righteousness, and I shouldn't be allowed to live. This is the same John with the same Jesus from 60 years earlier, and now he sees the glorified Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I don't deserve to be alive. He says, I fell at his feet like dead. I hope to encourage you, my friends, today, that you get a glimpse of who the real Jesus is. There's so much more than the first impression you get of him in the Gospels. He veiled his glory in the Gospels so men and women could stand to be around him. But today, when you worship Jesus, when you pray, when you sing songs, when you hear the gospel being preached, I hope that for the rest of your life, you think about and honor Jesus as we see here in Revelation 1 today. May Revelation chapter 1 change the understanding of how you see King Jesus. That he is that powerful. He is that majestic. He is that to be feared in reverence. Proverbs says that the fear of the Lord is what? The beginning of wisdom. And so today, may our reverence for King Jesus not be one of a Jewish man on a dusty road in Jerusalem, but as the exalted and lifted high King of kings and Lord of lords. He says, I fell at his feet like a dead man. But I'm thankful. I'll end with this next phrase, and we'll get the last few verses next week of this chapter. You can almost feel the intimidation and the fear. But Jesus laid his right hand. That's a good one. Sorry for you lefties like me. He laid his right hand on him. And he says, don't be afraid. You know why John didn't have to be afraid? He was afraid. Don't misunderstand me, as he should have been, and rightfully so. You know why he didn't have to be afraid? Is because he had trusted in the finished work of Jesus, that he saw firsthand his death, burial, and resurrection, and he realized Jesus was the Lamb from God who took away his sin, and he trusted in Jesus as his King and as his Master. And even though he had never seen Jesus in this glory, he'd already trusted in him. And Jesus said to him, don't be afraid. And he lifted him up. Can I promise you, my friends, every person in all of world history today until Jesus returns will fall as a dead man when they see the glorified Jesus one day. But for those of us that have trusted in the finished work of Jesus At first glimpse, we will be overwhelmed in fear, and rightfully so. So Jesus will lay his hand on you and say, don't be afraid. I've already made you right with me.